Oh my God. Kathy Lee and Regis had nothing over you two.
You're the best. We trust that opinion as well. Susan, this is a really serious topic, obviously, and I think a lot of
Oh my God, she's literally just like us. We talk about like the deepest, most miserable, horrible things, but like we also can't stop making each other laugh. And so, yeah, it's like the levity and the darkness and the joy and the pain and the. Should we go?
And that's actually the beauty of having done the work.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Dr. Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to We're Not Fine.
That's my line.
Is it always your line?
Welcome to We're Not Fine. And I say it in like a weird
Hey, guys. Welcome to We're Not Fine.
Your podcast about all things relationships.
I can tell that we usually do it differently.
Yes, exactly.
Because that was really short.
I know. Do you say
you just kind of said all things
relationships and
what if you just said intimacy?
Intimacy.
Okay. No, it's not all about intimacy. We usually do the other way, so we should. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I guess what, you guys? Happy Jewish New Year.
Ooh, so I thought we should maybe redo the intro like 5 more times.
Oh my gosh. I don't even think they've seen that last intro and outro.
What is it?
Where I forced you to do the outro 3 times.
I don't remember.
And then you were doing a lot of huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, and that's the one that we're going with.
Good.
So
that sounds like a good plan.
We invited Douglas L. Jensen over for Rosh Hashanah dinner. And it was his first experience. He said he did have matzo balls before.
I've had matzo balls before, but your mother's matzo ball soup was outstanding. Yes. I think I'm the only one that finished mine, though.
Yes, I mean, because...
Like, I love it. Maybe, go ahead.
The matzo balls are so dense. And once you eat a matzo ball, it's really hard to keep moving on to the rest of the stuff. But yeah, she was a little offended that not everyone finished every sip.
But I was in her favor because I finished my matzo ball soup. I want to talk about this a little bit. So, I don't know how much has been revealed, but Talia, you have an extensive history that's connected to the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, as I was listening to her mother, who is what, 33 years old?
That's right. Plus a few. She's almost 80.
I know. And she has a story.
Yes.
About the Holocaust. And as I listened to it unfold, I found myself listening intently and just being very, very touched by her story. And it came out so easily. And then at one point when I asked her, like, how does it feel to tell the story? She has told it a number of times and she wants to tell it.
Yes. I mean, all of the people that have experienced it in one way or another, they're either 100 years old if they've actually, been in it. They're in their 90s. And it's sort of this legacy that gets passed down generation to generation. It's a story that needs to be told. And it's also like there's trauma, right? Intergenerational trauma.
Which, Talia, as I said to you, on a very kind of personal note, related to my friend Talia, I start thinking about that. Like as therapists, we kind of go down people's histories. We go down, where were your grandparents born? How did things transition? And you learn so much about somebody, right? Because of their history and because of where they came from and where they got to now. And it is so powerful. But her mother, I was mesmerized by. I just wanted to hear more and more and more. And I found myself, of course, getting a little teary at how very just incredibly tragic and horrific people can treat each other in the course of our history. And so I don't know. I kind of want Talia's mother on the podcast, but I don't know that will be a good idea.
I mean, she is a very spicy lady. I'm sure she would have a lot to say.
And she makes really good matzo ball soup. Yum. The whole meal, by the way, was amazing.
Why? Thank you.
Whatever that thing is on that salmon.
The
that you
rub.
made.
You
The
liked my
rub.
rub? Oh my God. It's so good. It's
Yep.
like garlic powder, brown sugar, paprika, lime zest.
Zzz.
I think basil, dried basil.
But basil. All right. I loved it. It was really good. And, honestly, and it made the celebration so incredibly. Thank you so much for
I'm
having me
so
again.
glad you were there because, you know that my little one often is incredibly shy. And he was spent the beginning kind of hiding out a little bit. And then all of a sudden he was your best friend. We were playing all sorts of games at the table. He played Moonlight Sonata for
Multiple
you.
times because I kept saying I'd like to hear it again. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yes, I'd like to hear it again and again and again.
It's so good. And do
I was
you know,
I was again in a trance as he was playing.
he's dyslexic and he doesn't know how to read
I don't-
music.
Dude,
it's just like he
yeah.
plays from his soul. He's sort of this like
I
elfin,
I love your
ethereal
children.
creature.
I love your husband. I love your children. I love you. I love your mother.
Well,
So,
good thing that you're a part of the fam.
as are you mine.
You guys, we have a beautiful episode today and
do.
really powerful. Our guest is Susan Gold, and she is here to talk about her, also intergenerational trauma and
Yeah.
a toxic childhood and escaping a narcissistic marriage. And we love a good comeback story. And she wrote a book, and we're so excited to introduce her to you. We wanted to tell you before we dive in that it is incredibly deep and it's powerful. And we just want to make sure that you know it's a story of abuse. Please take care of yourselves. And if it's too triggering, we trust that you're going to do right by yourself and make sure you've got self-care and support around it.
Without further ado,
We're Not Fine family. We are beyond excited to introduce to you the beautiful and talented Susan Gold, who is a true Renaissance woman. Like seriously, like what don't you do really?
well, we'll find out if there is anything.
We're gonna find out what you don't do. An endurance athlete, a mom of a son in college. And it sounds like you also have a handful of rescue animals and that you're really a big part of this world, which I love so much. We have a few ourselves. And you were formerly in New York working in the entertainment industry with a lot of A-listers, which is also really fascinating. And now you live in rural Montana. And it feels like you're just like blissed out in nature. And it's really pretty incredible.
It could be. Welcome, Susan. We're so lucky to have you today.
My gosh, I think I'm going to sign up for a recording every day of the week. I just
Let's do
need
it.
you guys. Like,
And she has
before I
amazing
launch.
glasses.
And Talia, you and I talked, and when we had a pre-interview conversation, our love of glasses. Yeah.
It's true.
It's working for both of you for
They're
sure.
the perfect accessory.
I feel like I should get some blank ones for Glasses Day.
You should.
What if I just did this?
I wore my white ones every day for like 8 months. And then I think one of your friends said, I need to change my glasses.
Did one of my friends say that?
Yes.
Who did it?
You know the one guy that you dated for 2 minutes? He was like,
I don't even know who that is.
He was like, she was fantastic. But she needs to get more pairs of glasses. And I'm like, I do. I really do.
Okay. I didn't know he said that.
So I moved into my fall and winter.
Luckily, we
hair.
broke up. Well, I don't even
think you were dating.
No, we really weren't. Anyway, we're off topic. Susan,
so
welcome.
Susan is here today to talk to us because she has a really powerful story to tell that we felt like our listeners needed to hear.
For sure.
And you wrote a book that sums it up. It's called Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. And you share your journey of abuse, addiction, and surviving narcissism in this relationship that you got out of, which you're going to tell us about as well. And all the while somehow created this fantastic career. And yeah, we want to hear your story.
It all sounds great, but Talia, I can't stop looking at how your nails look like they match the "we're not fine" script.
They do. They totally do.
Well, because I decided that purple was going to be the new fall color. I had a lot of turquoise all summer. It's a really boring story. Want me to go on?
I think it's fascinating. I think we should talk about nails for a while.
Purple? You have purple. It's fall. I've decided.
Sorry, Doug. We interrupted you. You were gonna be the master of ceremonies and get us focused on.
I actually was going to focus off of glasses, although we can. Anyway.
I'll just do the whole interview like this.
Yeah, if you could.
My fingernails.
If you could. Could you get glasses to match that?
Yes, I shall.
Yes.
Oh my God, Kathy Lee and Regis had nothing over you two.
You're the best. We trust that opinion as well. Susan, this is a really serious topic, obviously, and I think a lot of
Oh my God, she's literally just like us. We talk about the deepest, most miserable, horrible things, but we also can't stop making each other laugh. And so, yeah, it's the levity and the darkness and the joy and the pain and the. Should we go?
And that's actually the beauty of having done the work.
Yeah.
Because I get that a lot. People don't understand why, I'm glowing, I'm smiling. I have a relationship with my family. Yeah. I have respect and love for them. And that's what happens when you really dive deep. Get courageous, look at the patterning, look at your past.
So, Susan, that's exactly where we want to start. And thank you for that kind of beautiful segue because, and the laughter about this serious topic, which is fantastic, by the way. And it does show your work and it shows that you've worked through. I will tell you, I'm very curious to hear about your family and your origin and your childhood and all of the pieces of the puzzle, because we as therapists, we do this long history. Most of us, I will say, and I don't want to say most of us. Talia and I really value the history of people to kind of understand how those puzzle pieces work together to make our choices, to make how we make our decisions, who we are as people, how we feel about ourselves, what our models are. Thank you for continuing to smile. We'd love to hear your story and your background.
Yeah, I just want to say both my maternal and paternal grandmothers, when I asked, said they would never marry my grandfathers again if they had the opportunity.
Wow. So did they say why?
I think they were both imprisoned. My maternal grandfather was horribly abused. As a child, he was beaten by his stepmother when he was very young, almost to the point of death. And that triggered psychotic episodes. And he perpetrated the same behavior on my mother. And she was beaten. And then it was assumed she would not discuss it. And my grandfather also encouraged my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, not to show affection to the kids just because of what he had experienced. And he thought he was doing that from a place of love. My father's father was a big Peter Pan and baby. He really didn't want children, but his mother was very go by the book. You get married and you have children. That's what you do. And therefore, my father could do nothing right. He was always judged harshly by his father. And my grandmother, his mother, tried to make up for it. And so he came to the point where he thought women were to serve and to serve him. And he was also a bit of a Peter Pan, in my opinion. And he soothed through alcohol. And my mother soothed through food. And they had 5 children in very short succession because that's what you do. And they had a religious understanding that, you didn't stop that. And it was chaotic in our home. I was the middle of 5 children. And my father was drinking 7:30 a.m. The whiskey bottle would uncork and you hear glug, glug, glug. My mother was on diet pills because that's what they prescribed back then, which were straight speed. So this was not a hotbed of mental health. And I also believe my mother was challenged with either borderline personality or schizophrenia because she could be so incredibly loving, guys. But then the next moment, and for no reason, I was being beaten to the point where I'd brown out and almost lose consciousness. So it was very unstable. I was quite empathic, intuitive, meaning I could enter the room and I could feel the emotion right away. One of them, I was 5. My father was in a cast. Their bedroom window was broken. Cold air was coming in. And my mother is looking away on the distance while my father's making fun of himself for punching the window and having to go to the ER in the middle of the night. And all I wanted to do was fix the energy between them and get out of that room as soon as possible. And this patterning followed. I didn't have a lot of self-worth or esteem. The girls were expected to clean house and cook meals and grow up way before we were to grow up. And the boys took out the trash. So, I got in this pattern of sort of enslavement very early. And all I wanted to do was get out. I'd watch Barbara Walters on my beanbag chair in my basement. And I was like, I'm going to New York City. I'm going to go there someday. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to go. And suffice it to say, I left the morning after I graduated from high school.
Wow.
And I was terrified, even though I had focused on getting out from a very young age, 9 or 10 years old, the planning started. And by 19, I was living in Greenwich Village on my own, doing an internship from college, and then went back to New York City immediately after college and started working in a glitzy talent agency called ICM, and wasn't making enough money. So I started training people on the side, and Barbara Walters became a client.
Wait, what do you mean training?
Wow.
What kind of training?
Like personal trainers do that, come to your house and train you, or at the gym, you get somebody one-on-one to train you. That's what I was doing way back before it was chic. And Barbara became
unbelievable.
Yeah, well, there's more. So she would have loved you. One day I rang her doorbell at 7 and she took a look at me and she said, Susan, get in here. What's going on with you? And back then I was very tight-lipped, didn't really share my issues with anybody. And she got it out of me within moments. I had been sexually harassed in the workplace the day before by my boss. And she said, I'm coming to work with you this morning and we're going to confront this man together. And I said, that's okay, Barbara, I'm going to handle it. So I went to work that day and confronted my boss. He promptly fired me. And I had 2.5 months of cash in the bank. I was newly sober because the same issues that I saw demonstrated in my own family were coming up for me, using alcohol, using food to placate and soothe. And I had just extricated myself from an abusive relationship where the man held the power through the purse strings. I'm embarrassed to say, but that's the truth. So I was highly motivated to succeed running my own talent brokerage firm. Barbara offered me an assistantship with her then fiance, who was running Laura Mara Film Distribution Company, but I couldn't do it after the abuse. I just couldn't play that role anymore. So there I was, like praying, hoping. And somehow I was introduced to Donnie Deutsch, who's an entrepreneur and a television iconic host. And Donnie was running his dad's ad agency. And he said, I want Andy Warhol to endorse my Pontiac dealership. Do you think you can get him? And I was like, well, I'll try. So I couldn't get anybody at the factory to pick up the phone. So I took the subway from the Upper West Side, where I lived, down to Murray Hill and knocked on the brownstone door. And Fred, Andy's manager, answered the door. And he looked at me and I introduced myself and I told him why I was there. And he said, okay, well, you come back tomorrow at this same time and I'll let you talk to Andy.
You must be really great at immediately connecting and making these relationships work. Usually people don't come and knock on a door of a brownstone and then get the meeting. That's amazing.
It was something that I learned in that family of origin, and thank God I knew how to read the room, and it was a tool that I used to stay safe.
Yep, of course.
And secure.
I call it scan.
Yeah.
You learn to read people, and you're determining safety or you're determining mood, it is a way that people cope. You so eloquently talk about it, Susan.
But you
Please
turned it
continue.
into a superpower.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was telepathic. I could get full sentences before it just turned too dangerous, and that wasn't acceptable. So I shut that down. But I knew going into that room that day with Andy, I mean, I had to wait for a while. I was so nervous, but the double doors to his studio flew open and it was dark in there, you guys. And I was scared to go in, but there was a pin spotlight in the center of the room coming down on this platinum hair going 17 different directions. And he was coloring away with colored pencils.
Oh my God.
And 3 pugs, like these little dogs with the smushed faces.
Yeah, I got a couple of them at home, Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, well, Andy would have loved your dogs. So Andy could care less why I was there. I was like yammering on, and these 3 dogs were running around the studio and tugging at his pants leg, and he's pulling him up and holding him like a baby. And this did not fly by me. I saw it. And finally, he made eye contact for the first time. It was after about 5 minutes, which seemed like 55. And he said, "Now, really, why should I do this?" And I just stopped. And I took a breath and I said, "Because your pugs can be in the shot with you."
Oh, you're so good.
I didn't know if that was true, but he said, "I'll do it." And that's really the deal that solidified my reputation of being able to match celebrities to brands. And that led me to do some work for Roger Ailes and Fox News Channel, helping him launch that channel ultimately, and then going to LA to do the same, and led me into producing for film and for television. And it was a great career, but what I've discovered was it's not the reason I'm here. It's not my purpose, and it's not my mission.
Do we ask her what that is now, or save it for later?
We ask her right now to keep the flow going because we're off the script, and I want to know what do you think her purpose is?
Tell us.
We're off script. Oh no.
We're off script.
So I've been privileged to see up close household names, right? And I can see that they're individual human beings pulling their legs, pants legs on one at a time and in public, and how painful that is. But I can see how all our programming and our past ancestry and lineage impacts our present.
Yeah.
And I've always stood up to truth. My mother used to, insist I was not telling the truth. And maybe that has something to play into why I am really honest, brutally honest. And I've had so many experiences, standing up to narcissistic abuse, standing up to sexual abuse, standing up to alcoholism and addictions, standing up to clinical depression, and really telling the truth that this is my purpose and my mission, to out a very taboo topic, to talk about toxicity in our bloodlines, in our family lines. So it becomes a more normal conversation and less obscured. And so we can drop that bag of shame that's so weighted that we're carrying. I mean, nothing pains me more, especially to see someone who's so pure of heart carrying this guilt that doesn't belong to them at all. So that's my mission and my purpose.
And
It's really lovely.
It's incredible. And there's something about you feeling that it is your mission and your purpose to speak the truth about something really ugly that many carry so much shame around. And you embodying that and modeling it, it really does lift a lot of shame for everyone that you come in contact with. And it's just, I can't think of a better purpose.
Here's what I want to say. I just want to highlight a couple of things that you said that I think are really important to our viewers. One of the things, and I'm probably a little more serious about this than, because I take this, by the way, we have somewhat similar backgrounds, I will tell you, Susan. And so the reason I think I'm a therapist is because I learned to scan what was a very unpredictable emotional experience in my household as well. Mm-hmm. So you learn to scan. And so I use that now as a therapist to read people and interpret behaviors, etc. You have an experience of speaking up as well in that workplace. Thank God you had Barbara. Again, may she rest in peace in whatever world that is that she's in now. But that experience of speaking up as a woman, I just, thank you for doing it. You should be able to do it. The response of getting terminated was fucked up, as we know. So, but it led to you having more and more and more opportunities. I want to go to the brutally honest comment. Like, I was really drawn to it. I smiled when you said it, because I think we become brutally honest when we've been kind of screwed up and, mind fucked, and there was gaslighting and whatever else that we had growing up. We learn to be brutally honest as a means of like managing that. Like we manage our lives and the chaos of it by, if we stay honest, then at least we know that we're in control of ourselves. And that's the goal. So really unbelievable. But I wanted to highlight the importance of being honest, because it helps you cope. It helps you feel like you don't have to be in chaos. There's no game playing in your life as a result of that. So amazing work. I have so many questions still, but I just wanted to highlight those before we go on.
I mean, how can we keep this short? I just feel like it's impossible. And you're like the world's most fascinating.
I know you said 35, 40 minutes. I'm like, there's not a chance.
No, we will.
I want like 5 hours. Maybe we need part 2 and 3 with you.
Or maybe we play it back at like hyper speed, like chipmunk speed. And so it'll be a shorter episode.
That's going to be really
we'll
good.
Just sound like chipmunks.
That's how I feel I've been telling the story. I'm not letting you get a word in edgewise, but Doug, I'm really glad that you brought up the brutally honest part, because that has also saved me. I mean, when I went to my first therapist, I was brutally honest. I said, my life is out of control and completely unmanageable. And he made suggestions based on that. He immediately started talking, was there alcoholism in my family? What are you talking about? Like, what does that have to do with my I've got some serious issues, dude. And he's like, yeah, while you're in treatment with me, no drinking, go to AA to listen to the people talk about your dad's drinking problem, which was very smart. And then go to meetings for children that had grown up with addicts and learn about how that affected you. And that was genius, but I would have never taken that opportunity had I not been brutally honest with myself and willing. And that has helped me all along the way walk through what I've addressed.
I appreciate you explaining that a little bit further. I also will tell you, Susan, as well as I do, this is the way to live. Mm-hmm. Brutal honesty is the way to live. I think, we walk around in so many different ways. You're now in the Midwest as well. We have a lot of people who do not tell people what they really feel, what they really think. And the important thing is to do that. And I also love that you identify that starting therapy for you, it was like connecting the dots, which your therapist was doing quickly. You're like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. Every piece of our lives together kind of creates who we are. And I just want to say too, like we could certainly go on to more questions, but the part that I'm struck by is we also never forget that while you do your work and you can smile about this and you can tell your story so eloquently, we always have that trauma with us in some ways. We always have those experiences, and they come up at different times in our lives, particularly when we're vulnerable. Mm. I think when we're depleted. So I imagine that for you as well. Have you found that?
I love that you talk about the trauma. And for me, I compartmentalized it. I did tons of work on it. And the talk therapy was essential to get down the storyline and the narrative.
Yeah.
Where I really started shifting was more somatic work. So hypnosis, meditation, going within my body and exploring where I was holding the trauma. Is it in the solar plexus? What color is it? What's the timeline? Is this current? Is it from my past? Is it from lifetimes ago? So this kind of work really is what shifted me at a cellular level and really created change within my being.
That just gives me chills. And there's such this mind body piece in trauma. And that's why, a lot of times, I'm sure you do as well, when I'm working with people and we seem to be stalled out with just the talk therapy, not just because it's also life changing, but you really do sometimes need a somatic element, because sometimes the pain is not accessible by words. It feels like it's in the cellular level.
Do you want to share a little bit about how you got in touch to do that work, that somatic work?
Yeah. So I've always responded from, the body, the being. I've been very physical since I was very young. It was really encouraged. I started as, dancing. And then that developed into marathoning, triathloning, and all the other endurance stuff that I've done. So I'm very in touch with my body and in tune. But what I didn't want to do was really feel. I mean, when I started this work, I barely knew happy, mad, sad, and glad. I was very shut down. I was like a concrete stone, and I didn't have time for that. And I certainly didn't have time for that bright, beautiful light of that inner child, Susie, that had walked through this whole storyline. So it was essential that I do this kind of work to finally slow down that overstimulated central nervous system that was working on overdrive to just stay safe. And even to come into touch with my breathing was triumphant.
To just be embodied and to be in your body in a way that felt safe, maybe for the first time ever.
And to come from the inside out. I mean, that took a really long time. I was always outside in, and I knew it. I mean, I was blessed to be invited to LA for what I thought was an amazing career opportunity. And it was really great. But I was really invited there to meet the man who would become my greatest guru, as in the word teacher, I want to define. And that was the man who would become my ex-husband.
Yes. Tell us how that, because it sounds like it started as this beautiful love story and then unfolded into narcissistic abuse.
So he was everything I thought I wanted. And we had so much in common. And he also knew how to make me feel special. And so we dated for a long time and lived together before we decided to marry and ultimately have our son. And what was happening there were red flags that were coming up. I was feeling more drained. My life was getting smaller. I was carrying a lot of weight. And when I bought the house for our family and after we had our son, that's when the veil ripped off the ruse. That's when things got tougher. And I knew there was something wrong. And you know how you hear the word alcoholic and alcoholism, but you really don't know how that could impact you in a relationship with an alcoholic. It was the same with the word narcissist. I had heard that word, but I sort of just blew by that word. And I didn't understand it. Just like I blew by the word empath. I didn't really understand that as it related to my own personality. So here I was, just really carrying a lot of the weight, working a night job to keep it together. And I was trying to make my partner come to the plate with integrity, especially fiscally, and it was not working. And I knew the marriage was well past its expiration date, but I was so codependent and I was so accomplished. I was so capable. My friends were like, they couldn't understand this, How could that be? You're carrying the weight of your household. You bought the house. You're doing all the repairs. You're doing all the taxes. Like, you're taking care of your son. Like, can't you just step up and tell this guy, make it happen? But I couldn't. So ultimately, I got this idea we were going to create a post-nuptial agreement to bring some integrity in. And we got to the last point, and I thought, wow, our marriage is saved. This is fantastic. And his eyes went in those cold reptilian slits, and he folded his arms and he said, I'm hiring an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. And that intuitive voice flew over my right shoulder through my heart, and it said, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself.
Wow, I've got chills.
Well, I held on to that, Talia. I needed to. We went back to reside in the same home, and I can't even call it a home through this year period. It was a domicile. And this is a metaphor for the relationship. He would not leave the master bedroom. So I took up residence on a mattress on the floor in a partial conversion in our garage. And that is the billboard it took to fall on my head, to see what I was allowing, to see where my value and my worth was. And instead of becoming victim, I decided this was my opportunity to really dive deep yet again. And that's when I did the most work internally with the help of a woman in Australia that had a program that was somatic specific to narcissistic abuse. And it was a year of holding no contact, meaning no verbal contact and no eye contact with the man that I had loved, because that was what it took to divorce one whom I feel was a narcissist. And I kept repeating that mantra, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. And when it felt unjust, and when I was enraged by what seemed like the lack of integrity, I just repeated, this is who you've settled for. And now it's time for you to step up and walk through. So within a calendar year, I was able to write him his 6-figure check, and he could go on to his next source of supply. Ooh. And why I call him my greatest guru is because he taught me my value. He taught me my strength. He taught me my power, and he reflected back to me for the first time my inner worth. And I got in touch with that beautiful child within me, and my life shifted.
Susan, you are extraordinary. I just have one question a minute.
I have a comment. Go ahead.
I don't even know how to phrase this, but I feel like I really want to ask a question that doesn't even have an answer. But it just feels like when I'm hearing you talk, I just feel like there's this really important connection between the narcissist, the codependence, and there's like this addiction, that the only way to break the addiction is this no contact and no eye contact. Like, I'm just so curious about, like, the only way to divorce a narcissist, or the only way to break free of the codependence, is the no contact.
I might say boundaries. Like, I think that's really what all of that is about. I want to go back to something you said before you elaborate on that as well, Susan. You know, you said supply, and I want to explain to viewers that narcissists need validation, affirmation, praise, and if they don't get it, they eventually do shrivel up and go seek it somewhere else. You said such a beautiful thing. If you stop engaging with the narcissist, they will eventually find someone else to give them what they need to get fed. And we have lots of people in our political and entertainment industry who we're learning are those people. So you talk about it so easily, but narcissism, as you said at the earliest part of this conversation, is a complicated disorder. And you don't know what it means exactly until you see it right in front of you. I also want to say, Susan, what incredible work to be able to reframe kind of that what he was seeing, and what, you know, you were able to take from that experience and grow from it and internalize that beauty and that self-esteem and who you really are as a glowing person, right? And it's just an amazing reframe that you took from that experience.
Well, it's really an incredible gift to be supported by the two of you in such a beautiful way. And your clients are so fortunate. Like, they have no idea.
Oh, very kind. Thank you.
But yes, you're right. And it was a brutal, excruciating process to come to that full understanding. I mean, I always use that spiritual axiom: you point one finger back, three come back at you. You point one out, 3 come back at you. And I used that to stay in some pretty brutal relationships. So I had to wake up from that spiritual axiom. But I really feel, maybe it's a little Southern California hooey that I have left in me, that I chose my lessons before I came in. Most of them anyway. I obviously have free will, that I was perfectly placed in the middle of those 5 kids with those parents, that I was really gifted by the sexual abuse that I was confronted with, that I was gifted to recover from addiction and learn from that. All these things, these boulders that are sort of moved around or moved over, have been gifts of soul evolution, if I'm willing to see it that way. And once I do, it's really really beautiful. I mean, my oldest brother and I have a really strong history of abuse. And I love my oldest brother. He is in so much pain, in my opinion, now because his childhood is blacked out with so much amnesia. And he doesn't really understand why pieces of his life aren't fitting together. So in writing this book, I couldn't write it by committee. I had to write this book from my heart and from my own experience.
Yeah.
And he read it. He read it in full, and I give him a lot of credit. He called me and he said, I admire your strength. I admire what you've experienced, and I am proud of you.
Oh, that is so beautiful. But it's heartbreaking because what I'm hearing is he hasn't found his peace or his healing, that he's in so much pain. He hasn't been able to take the first step towards the work you've done.
And that's what I'm praying that this book will do. I mean, Toxic Family was not my title. It's my publisher's title. And I thought, oh, great, we're going to get all Jerry Springer on people. Oh, my title was Magical Illumination, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, because with all the work I've done now, that's what I feel it's been. But that's not what's going to attract the reader that will benefit by this book. And it was really difficult not to feel like I was really throwing my family under the bus with that title. But that is the beauty. It starts to crack some of the denial so we can hopefully discuss what's real and authentic. And I've always tried to come from a place of love.
Well, and toxic families, as you well know, Susan, don't always acknowledge the toxicity because they haven't done, not everyone has done their work, as you just referenced. And so there can be strain. It was interesting that you started today's conversation by saying that you love your family, you found a place of peace with your family to understand where they come from. And there's compassion is the word I think I want to use. Like compassion in all of that. Like you understand as you talk about what your parents went through in their own childhoods, you have a great deal of compassion for them, just maybe. And this is where I think the phrase, like, people doing the best they can, I don't necessarily love it because I think everyone should try to do their work and be a better person and be a good parent and be a good partner and be a good, friend. But I think there's a reality that it's really hard to get out of those patterns, especially in generations gone by.
Yeah, I think it's not the easier, softer way. But when I engage with my family, I can really see the free place I'm in. I'm in a different zip code, I'm engaging, but I see the confines. I see the restrictions. And what's hardest is I see the pain that, I feel they sense it on a subconscious level. But they're still carrying on the facade.
And starting that process, as you know, is hard. We need sometimes something to kind of smack us in the face. And for you, it might have been this relationship that just got really, really devastating and impossible. And we have nowhere to go but forward. So I think sometimes when we're in those situations, I was in a relationship with a narcissist at one point and I kept going. And New York, by the way. My older daughter lives in LA and works in the industry. So I'm listening to all of your comments about those two cities. But the part about it is, so I dated this dude, and the reality was it took a physical altercation. It took him to do something physical to me and for me to fight back to really end that. And that was the last time I saw him. So
you talk about scanning, which I see as empathic ability, and you landed in a narcissistic relationship. It's very common, and I'm not surprised, and I'm glad you could move through it. And you have the grin, the authentic grin, not that plastic one. Remember that plastic saran wrap we used to have?
Oh my God. And I'll tell you, you're absolutely right. So I'm like resonating with your story. Actually, I'm gonna tell you that I wrote "I love her" to Talia a few minutes ago.
And I sensed it.
I could barely want to stop this.
We're bursting. But one thought that I had while you were talking about maybe the difference between you and, I don't know, 99.9% of traumatized humans in the world is that I have no idea where you got that strength to start a life of brutal honesty. from this place of just, I'm picturing this like tiny little girl caretaking everybody, completely out of her body, trying to make everything okay, not even having an internal experience because there's no time and place or safety to have a feeling or a thought. So you're coming from this place of absolute terror, and then you're somehow able to find the strength to have brutal honesty with yourself. And then I'm thinking about your poor brother, right? Who is sort of maybe more of a typical experience of someone who doesn't even know how to begin. Can't even, there's amnesia. And for some it's denial. For some it's compartmentalizing. For some it's the addiction. For some it's numbing, but can't even begin to face that pain. I think that's the more typical experience. Like, how in the hell did you do this? How could you even tell someone to be brave enough or strong enough to take that first step?
I think that was in the fabric of my being. I think that was one of the tools I was sent down with to take on all I have. And that was one of the priceless gifts of my being. So, because I can't explain it any other way. And that's also why I feel I'm finally living my purpose.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
So with the coaching that you do, what advice do you give people?
Well, first they have to be aware, right? They come in, they may not even be aware, and then they have to accept where they are, which is another brutal piece of it. And from there, you can take action. But, really it's about telling your story, because a lot of us haven't even had the opportunity to do that honestly and really be heard. And then from there to move on with addressing it. And I always go into self-soothing and self-soothing tools, because most of us are traumatized, living with our shoulders up in our earlobes. And that's the natural state. We know no differently. But it's been a privilege to work one-to-one, but I'm really hoping I can go more the group level, because I'm seeing such a strong need. And the more of us that wake up and address this, the more of us there are to help others that are struggling.
Susan, you mentioned something too about like, you need to be aware, like that's a starting gate. And what I always tell people is, how do you feel? Like when people are struggling in their relationships, I ask people, how do you feel when you're with that person? How do you feel when you're away from that person? And I know you get this based on your story, but there's anxiety, there's worry, there's always not knowing what you're going to get. And if you're in an anxiety-ridden relationship, pay attention to that and know that that is not a secure attachment. It is not it's probably a familiar attachment. And I think traumatized people pick very familiar people in their lives, right? We pick the same types of people over and over until we figure it out that it does not work and that it hurts and that we're always on edge. The shit that you put up with in your relationship, the shit that some of us put up with in our relationship. I love that you are touching yourself and feeling contained, I'm assuming connected to your body. And I've seen that multiple times today. I love that you do that. But, Susan, the reality is when we pay attention to that, we have to know that that's something that is not good for us. And we have to address it, and we have to figure out, like, pay attention. So I love that that was your starting gate on when you coach people through this.
Well, and also with trauma, I feel like you just sent something to me about many people's experience with trauma is that red flags and butterflies feel exactly the same, because it's familiar and it's exciting and it feels like love. It feels like the only familiar love.
Yeah.
Susan, what if we're in love with you? And what if this was the best? I feel like this was like the best. That you're like, when I found you, other people's comments about you were that you were magical. She's magical. She's mad. And I was like, I'd like to know a little more about this magical human being. Well, now we know.
We know. And, Susan, this is one of those interviews. I don't always write, I love the person on my paper.
That's a first.
I kind of want to go over and over and over some things. I have so many more questions. I want to know so much more about your story. We might need a part two.
We might need a part two.
I am not feeling finished at all.
I know. We love you.
I feel like we're just like starting this conversation and there's so many more follow-ups.
Susan, how can people find you? how can our listeners find you and all of your magic? And we'll have everything in the show notes so people can click and buy your book and whatever they want.
The book's on Amazon. And if you feel moved to speak with me directly, just go to susangold.us. It's all there.
Sure.
And Doug and Talia, I just want to say, I am so grateful the two of you collided, that you've created this podcast, We're Not Fine, that you create the conversation that you do, that you have the brilliance and the ability to communicate the way that you do. And I really appreciate all the content you're producing. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes finance. Who wants to get up on a Sunday morning and do this? But thank you both. I'm on my knees humbled. You have a fan.
Susan, thank you so much for those incredibly kind and thoughtful words. It really has been a gift having you on today.
I'm so glad that we collided as well.
Yeah.
And I just feel like this is such an important story. I cannot wait for it to air and for people to be moved in this way and to find you and the magic that you're putting out there in the world. We literally could not love you more. And thank you so much for being in our world and on the show.
Thank you, Susan, so much for your time.
Thank you both. And thanks to your listeners.
Thank you, my dear. We'll talk soon. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you got as much value out of this last episode as we did.
I must tell you, I think this particular episode, of course, could have gone on and on and on. I had a million more questions, but we also encourage you to go to we'renotfine.com where you can submit any questions about any relationship issue you have, friends, family, coworkers, whatever it is in your life. If you even have questions about your relationship with yourself, please let us know. You can anonymously, you can put your name on it. We'll give your first name maybe. But we would love for you to ask questions to us so we can ponder them on the We're Not Fine podcast.
And when you're done liking, subscribing, sharing with all of your favorite people, or even your enemies, we'll take that too. Find us on social media, Dr Talia Jackson, douglasljensen with an EN, and We're Not Fine Pod. And we're also on YouTube, and I believe it's just We're Not Fine. And we cannot wait to see you next week.
We're looking forward to it.
And we're not fine, but
at least it's pumpkin spice season at our local coffee shops.
If you like cardamom, which I hate. Love you
I
guys.
love cardamom.